Danish rolls recently. First time ever trying to replicate the Pillsbury ones. They were delicious. All right. So, hello everybody. I'm making sure that we are recording. We're good to go. Welcome to our monthly call. We are in March, and these are our LoProCO Local Procurement Colorado calls, where we are talking about farm to school and topics that relate to farm to school, actually making farm to school the norm in our state and even nationwide, and what it can take to make that happen. And also, these calls will always feature a culinary component as well, where we are highlighting a locally grown or raised or processed product in Colorado and giving you some recipes and some tips and tricks for how to use these products and some fun facts about them as well. So happy to have you all here today. Myself, I am Jessica Wright, Chef Jess from Nourish, Colorado. We have Chef Fernando joining us as well. And then we have also brought in our policy guru, our policy expert at our organization, Terry Livermore. She's our operations manager and also just knows all things policy and really teaches me new things all the time when it comes to policy. Which means we're talking about policy today because right now we have both of our sessions happening at the state level and the federal level. So it's really important to be caring about policy, not only right now, but also just in general. We'll take a little bit of time to give you just the basics of how policy works. I have found that, I think I know how policy works, and then we start really diving in, and I keep realizing that it's always important to revisit the basics and keep getting that foundation in place, because when you have the foundation, it becomes easier to really understand how to create change using policy. And really, the entire call is around how we can take policy and use it to support our farm to school efforts. And then our culinary demo is going to be all about locally grown Colorado beans, cornmeal that's produced in our state, and of course, those delicious Pueblo green chilies. So we're excited to get into that and talk about that today. One quick exciting thing to note, if you are a school food professional, you might already be aware of this, but USDA did just announce that they are extending the free school meals all the way through September 30th, 2021. Again, it's not like what we were hoping, which was to probably get it for the entire school year for 2021, 2022, but at least this is a start so that if you are doing a summer meals program, instead of having to wait like what we had happen last year up until like May to find out if meals would be free, and then it was like a 1-month process every single time with the extensions, we know now the meals are free through September 30th, and then all of the additional nationwide waivers around meal service times, adults being able to pick up the meals for the kids, bulk meal distribution, that has all been extended to September 30th, 2021. So that's exciting, and that's also policy. And there was a lot of efforts from people like yourselves really pushing with our legislators to make this happen and to continue extending these waivers to make your lives easier. So kudos to you if you're some of the ones who went out there and emailed and said, please extend this, because it has happened and we need you to continue hounding them, honestly, so that ultimately we can get to universal meals. But we'll talk about that some more. I'm going to turn it over to Chef Fernando to start talking about our culinary stuff today.
Thank you, Chef Jessica. And yeah, for today, as Chef Jessica mentioned, we're going to be talking about, for the culinary portion, about some beans, corn, and green chilies, because we produce a lot of those 3 ingredients here in Colorado, and you can make so many different recipes with them that today we'll be sharing some of those. But just to give you some cool, fun food facts, beans, they're lifesavers. They are powerhouses of protein and fiber. And fiber is unfortunately one of those things that as Americans, we don't really get enough of. So add some beans to your diet and you'll be adding a lot of fiber. They originate in South America, in the Andes, around Peru and Ecuador. And something funny that I found out, there's a bean recipe that is served in the US Senate. It has been served, that same recipe, since the early 1900s. And it's served every day. So Terry, I bet you probably had it in your days working at the Capitol. We grow them all in several parts here in Colorado. So to really serve local menus during the winter, it's easy, right? And there's so many kinds. With corn, it came from Mexico. All over the world, they call it maize. It comes from the word maíz from Spanish. Something cool and fun about each one of the ears has about 800 kernels. That's a lot. And we grow them all over the world, except in Antarctica, obvious reasons, the cold, they don't really like it. But there are so many different varieties. There's pink, red, black, purple, blue, so many different varieties that the key with corn and beans, we gotta eat all different varieties so we get all the different minerals and all of their goodness. And we also find them in a lot of non-food items like food dyes, detergents, shoe polish, etc. And Pueblo chiles. All kinds of peppers and chiles are full of vitamins and minerals like vitamin A, vitamin C. They're super awesome. There's a little competition between New Mexico and Colorado. I think the Colorado Pueblo chiles are a little better because of the soil, the altitude, the really hot days and the cool nights. They tend to be hotter and a little meatier, and I'm all for that. And yeah, we grow them all over Colorado. And again, we prepare some recipes for you, and we're so excited to share them with you so you can hopefully start making them in your operation. So I'm gonna share with you real quick a video that we made sharing some of our recipes, and you'll see it in a minute. Can you see my screen? Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is our second culinary session. And for today, we're going to be talking about beans, green chilies, and cornmeals galore. Why? Because we grow all of those products here in Colorado, and they are available throughout the winter months. So let's begin about beans. We selected a delicious recipe that I know you're going to love, and you can really choose any kind of bean you want. Here in Colorado, we grow a lot of beans in the Southwest, Dove Creek, up north by Greeley. Here in Colorado, an agriculture state, we grow a lot of beans, so let's go ahead and take advantage of that. We have so many different varieties. I have some cranberry beans, some calypso, I got some anasazi, these are the pintos, some bolitas, bolita, and we got black beans, and there are so many other kinds of beans. Super nutritious, full of fiber, protein. I love beans, okay? And I got all my mise en place right here. And I know in Colorado, because of the altitude, they may take a little time to cook when you cook them on the stovetop. Look at what I did. I soaked them in water, and that really speeds up the process. So the night before, you want to make sure that you store them, rinse them with water, put them in a container, and then fill it up with water and make sure that you go 2 fingers above the beans because they're gonna absorb the water and expand. So you wanna make sure that they're in the refrigerator with water, soaking up that water, and they're gonna reduce the cooking time by a lot, all right? When it comes to cooking them, we have different options. You can either use a pot and cook them right on the stove, or you can use a pressure cooker, a crock pot, an Instapot, or even util skillet, whatever you may use. Or you can even use the steamer. That's a great one because you don't even have to cover them, put some water, pop them in the steamer, and they get done in like an hour and a half-ish, all right? Try it. It really does work, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and get started by rinsing my beans, okay? To get all of these old water that I was soaking it in. And I'm just gonna leave them right here so that all of the water goes away because we're not gonna use that water. We're gonna be featuring one of our favorite products. It is a bow and arrow cornmeal product from the southwest of Colorado. It is a Native American grown cornmeal, and we really like it. We feature it in our trainings before. It's great. It is grown by the Ute Mountain Ute tribe. And if you're able to get a hold of this product, please try it out. It's great. It also has some Pueblo chilies. If you're able to, again, buy some of these, you can freeze them and have them throughout the year. I love Pueblo chilies. They're one of my favorite chilies. So let's get to it. It's quite simple, and I hope you can really give it a try because you already have your beans, I hope. So I got my oven preheated at 350 degrees. And we're gonna begin by combining all of our dried ingredients. So I have here flour and cornmeal, and I'm gonna give that a mix real quick. And as I'm mixing, I'm gonna add the sugar. I have baking powder, all of it right there, and a little bit of salt. So I just wanna combine all of the dried ingredients really well, okay? Make sure that it looks pretty much one color, and you'll know it is well combined. So that looks ready. I'm just gonna set that to the side for now. Now, we need to get all of the wet ingredients ready. So we're gonna be doing 3 eggs. Crack them on the side always. There's 1, 2, and number 3, okay? Before we add anything else, we need to beat them up just a little bit. Give them a little stir. Perfect, because you want to really make sure you combine the yolks and the whites. Now, add your green chilies. You need some oil to go along with it. And the other ingredient is going to be milk. So I'm just going to add all of it right here. And make sure we have a nice mixture, okay? And the last thing is, this is gonna make it so good, some cheddar cheese. And if you can see, it's shredded really fine so that it cooks and it bakes really nicely with our cornbread. I'm just gonna give that a nice mix. All right, now that I have that, I'm just gonna put this to the side. With a spatula, we need to combine these two, and we're gonna do it by using the well method. And what is the well method? Just come to your bowl and make a well in the middle, and we're gonna pour our wet ingredients right in the middle. We can do it all at once. Get every single green chili and cheese. And now we just need to combine, and we're gonna be doing it by folding. This is what it's gonna look like, all right? So now I have a greased hotel pan, and what I did, I just put a little bit of oil, and with a paper towel, I spread all the oil, or you can use pan spray, whatever you may have. And I'm just gonna pour it right into it. Just make sure it is nicely spread. And that's it. This is gonna go into my 350-degree oven, and we'll come back in 20 minutes.
Awesome. That's the first part of the video. And you know what we have found and what we have heard from so many of you all is that you want to buy more local products, or maybe you're interested in getting into farming, or maybe you would like to get a school garden growing on the side of your school, and maybe even have a farmer who does that specifically for you. But one thing we keep coming across is that you need money to support this. Maybe you need distribution support. Maybe you actually need land so that you can have a farm. Maybe there's infrastructure that's needed. Whatever it is, we always come across when we talk to you all that there are things that you need that us as an organization and even those working on the ground might not have access to. However, this is where policy can really play a role and help you get those resources that you need so that you can bring these visions and these goals, especially to make farm to school the norm, to life. And when it comes to policy? Why now? We're going to dive in a bit more into the nuance around all these different bills that are out and what they actually mean. But now is a key time for policy. We have our farm bill. This is a big one when it comes to basically all things farming, and then also the SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, is also falling under the farm bill. That's coming up in 2023 is kind of when we're slated to have that one back in line at the federal level. That seems like it's a far ways away, but if 2020 has taught us anything, Time flies by incredibly fast. The fact that it's already March 2021, it still just kind of blows my mind. So now is the time to start learning about these bills and learning where you find things that are relevant to you and what matters to you within these bills and how to actually start advocating for support within the different types of bills that we have. So Farm Bill is coming up. We also have Child Nutrition Reauthorization, which should be happening this year. They're talking about it. We're hoping this comes around this year, especially because one of the big things that we are focusing on is the universal access to meals and really using what happened with the pandemic and the fact that all of our meals for school meals are free now, using that as really a great foundation as to why we should continue offering free meals and reducing the stigma and that administrative burden that comes from having to manage the free, reduced, and paid price process. So keep an eye out because when it's coming, it is time to move and we need all of you in the mix. At the state level, we have seen incredible things happening, not only in Colorado, but also in many other states around the nation. New York has local purchasing incentive bills that are in place to provide an additional reimbursement for schools to actually buy local products. Oregon has a fantastic program that's similar to that. Michigan has one. Vermont, I mean, they're already introducing a universal meals bill specifically for their state on top of farm to school incentives and training and technical assistance. So lots of really cool things happening on the state level when it comes to farm to school and really supporting what we're trying to do with making farm to school the norm. And then another thing that's really important to highlight is, I mean, the pandemic, it really highlighted a lot of the cracks in our current food system. And it reinvigorated a lot of conversations about how we can create a new model that is decentralized on a local level while really being in coordination with the national and global distribution efforts. So it's reinvigorated these conversations. It's brought a lot of new people into the fold as we've started realizing why we need to build support for our small and mid-sized farms, how we need to really rebuild and provide resources for our rural communities who really tend to be the ones who are doing a lot of the farming for us in these urban areas around our nation. It's highlighting the fact that we need more new and young farmers and that as this generation that has been farming for decades is starting to age out, who is going to step in and fill that gap? And how can we get our kids excited about what agriculture is and what agriculture could actually be? And it has really gotten people to start talking about how we can reimagine our food system into one that is truly supporting local and regional economies. So this is really all exciting. You know, the pandemic has been tough. It has presented a ton of challenges. However, it has honestly given us all an opportunity to see what matters, what's valuable, and what we can do to invest in our communities and the people who are out there doing the hard work every single day to grow the food, raise the food, and then basically feed the children in need. So let's dive into the landscape a little bit more and start learning the lingo so that you all can become policy experts for us. And I'll turn it over to Terry.
Hi, everyone. I always love following Chef Jess and Chef Fernando, but fortunately for you all, I'm not doing any cooking. I will say as much as Jess says she's learned from me on policy, that's been returned tenfold in the kitchen. I've learned knife skills. I've learned about cornmeal and beans today and previous other things. So we're lucky to have them. I'm going to talk a little bit more specifically about what bills are out there right now or are coming down the pike with more specifics around what's in them and why we should care about those at the federal level and at the state level. As Jeff said, the Colorado State Legislature is in session right now. They meet every single year, usually from January to May. It's a little bit wonky this year because of the pandemic. They took a month off of February, so they'll go actually into June this year. And then Congress is in the United States Congress is year round. They take a lot of breaks, like August. They usually take a month off, but it's a year round. It's a year round event for them. So we'll get into a little bit more about the structure of all that later. But these two bills that Jess mentioned, these are the two bills for farm and food issues at the federal level. And because they're such gigantic bills at the federal level and there's so much money involved in them, they impact everything that happens at the state level in the world of farm and food. So Child Nutrition Reauthorization is what it's called right now, CNR. If you ever hear CNR, that's what people are talking about. This bill, as Jeff mentioned, the last time it was redone in 2010, it was Michelle Obama got behind it at the time, and it was passed in 2010. It was called the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act. Prior to that, it really hadn't been updated since 1966. So that's how little people were, how little thought people were putting into school food issues. The CNR has, the Child Nutrition Bill has all of the school meal programs in it. I mean, this is where school food, youth food, WIC, I think, is in here. Anything like that is going to be found in the now Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act. So not a lot of thought was going into that from 1966 till Michelle Obama got hold of it in the mid 2000s. She worked on this with Congress and passed the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act in 2010. And then we're waiting on the other one. The way the federal bills typically work, big bills like this, and this is true for CNR and the Farm Bill, they're basically passed and then they're 5-year, it's a general 5-year time frame. Sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's longer, but they generally authorize things for 5 years and then they're supposed to come back and redo them. Well, Child Nutrition Reauthorization hasn't been redone since it was done in 2010. It was largely left by the wayside, some of which was good and some of which was bad, depending on what was going on during the Trump administration. So last year, they almost got to it. The Senate started to take it up, but election year politics got in the way, and so it got shoveled to the side. So we're hoping it's going to come back again. The important thing, the reason the 5-year renewal matters for bills like this, for big bills like this, is there are programs within these bills that are mandatorily funded, and there are programs that are discretionarily funded. This matters because if it's mandatory funding, even when they don't reauthorize it. So the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act basically expired in 2015, but all the programs that had mandatory funding kept going. So the National School Lunch Program is a mandatorily funded program. So it kept going, but other programs aren't. So summer EBT, for example, is not a mandatorily funded program. It's a discretionary funded program. So its funding ended in 2015. Congress has kept appropriating money, but not nearly at the same level. So I think when it started, it was $85 million for a year for summer EBT. Now it's something in the order of, I think, $25 million a year. So you can see why this matters that these things get renewed. The Farm Bill, same thing. It was 2 years late getting reauthorized. So they were supposed to do it in 2012. They didn't do it till 2014. And then fortunately, they then redid it in 2018, which mattered for Colorado because Double Up Food Bucks, which is a program we run at Nourish Colorado, which enables people who are on SNAP or food stamps to double their fruits and vegetable purchases up to $20. That program was a discretionary funded program. So had the Farm Bill not been renewed in 2018, that program would have gone away. So the Farm Bill was renewed, and so that program then received mandatory funding. So everyone's breathing a sigh of relief around that one. But that's why the 5-year time frame is a big deal. So CNR we've talked about, the Farm Bill we've talked about a little bit. I want to go into just a little more detail about how these bills work and something that Jess mentioned, which is at the federal level, and this is only true at the federal level, not at the state level. At the federal level, as these big bills come up, so CNR, we're expecting that to come up this year. So people are starting to introduce what are called marker bills. Instead of putting everything you want in one bill, what Congress does is everyone introduces their own concept. So there's going to be a marker bill out there about universal school meals. There will be a marker bill about farm to school, which is also in the Healthy Hunger Free Kids Act. You might think it would be in the Farm Bill, but it's not. It's in the school nutrition bill. So there will be marker bills about all of these things. And so every legislator out there is going to introduce what matters to them in the hopes that it gets folded into the final bill. That's how it works at the federal level. So when you hear people talk about marker bills, those are the bills that we're trying to get into the bigger bills. And as you can see, farm to school and universal access to meals will be 2 big bills that we at Nourish will be paying attention to and supporting, working with our delegation to support. And that's where we'll rely on all of you to make phone calls to your congressperson, to your senator, and asking them to support these issues as well. The Farm Bill is, I'm trying to keep track of my time because I'm really bad about this. The Farm Bill is, as you can see, it's the Farm and Food Bill. 80% of it is SNAP. 80% of the money in the Farm and Food Bill is SNAP. But as you can see by that, this is a great graphic, the Swiss Army knife, that really goes to show you how much of everything that's in that bill. We're going to go into this one nearly as much because, as Jess said, it's further out. But now is the time to start understanding what's in this bill and how it impacts what's going on in your community. And so now we're going to move along. We do entire presentations on the Farm Bill that are an hour long themselves. So I'm going to quickly run through what's going on at the state level right now. As I said, the state legislature is in session. They'll be in session probably through June. The three bills that we're mostly focused on right now are, we being Nourish Colorado, and that would be relevant to the farm and food space, are, the first one's House Bill 1132. That means it was introduced in the House. Jess is going to talk about this later, but this was a bill we passed in 2019. And it provided local purchasing power to school districts. It was a pilot program. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, they took the funding from that to try to cover holes in the state budget. But they've kept the program because they want to fund it. It's just a question of when they'll have the money to do it. So we're still following that. It's still there. They're continuing it for another year because we don't obviously have the money for it at this point in time. And we're going to get more detail on that bill later. Senate Bill 87 is a farm worker rights bill. It was introduced for the first time this year. It's creating quite a stir at the Capitol and elsewhere. We, Nourish Colorado, have been neutral on this bill until just this morning. We officially decided to take a position of support because we believe that in order to transform the food system and so nutritious food is accessible for all, that farm workers' rights is a big part of that. So we will be supporting Senate Bill 87. And then the next one is a bill that has not yet been introduced, but it's a big immigration reform bill. They've actually changed the name. It's a much longer name, but it's 2006. They passed a lot of bills, anti-immigration bills, in a 2006 special session, and this undoes a lot of that. One of them, which directly affects our ability to use funds at the state level to help provide produce boxes to people who are on women, infant, and children program and older adult programs. So we're active members of that coalition. We'll be supporting that bill when it comes out as well. We have a newsletter that we put out monthly. Within that is access to a policy blog. You can sign up for that on our website, or you can email me. My name is at the end of this. We also keep our website relatively updated about what's going on in the policy world on our policy page. And then here is just a list of some other organizations, both state and national, that you can follow. They're active in the policy world. They have different perspectives on things. So it's always good to look around and see what's out there. So these are some good organizations to take a look at for what's going on. Okay, we at Nourish Colorado, we do a lot of, we focus on state and federal policy primarily. We're looking to transform the food system. And as we've talked about with CNR and the Farm Bill, if you really want to make changes in the food system, you have to push on those big levers to do it. However, I would be very remiss if I wasn't saying that probably the most important piece where policy change can occur is at the local level. Now that can be through elected bodies. It can be through school policies, for example. It doesn't have to be, I always talk to people who work in their local communities and they're like, well, we don't do policy work. And then they tell me what they've been doing and I'm like, you've been doing policy work all along, you just didn't know it. So I think it's important to understand that when you're working in your local community, all of this is policy. It might not be as formal or it might not be a piece of legislation, but it's policy. Anytime you're making change, you're creating policy change. City and county, in the city, you've got town halls. You've got county commissioners. You've got city council. You've got city councils, you've got county commissioners. almost all of them are very accessible. The more local you are, the more accessible your elected official is. So, because you're going to run into them in the grocery store. I grew up in Gunnison, so I understand rural and small town dynamics, and I miss them, by the way. But you have more access to people. The closer they are to the local level. So get to know them. Go to meetings. Sign up for your local health and wellness policy, committees. Work on policies and ordinances that way. Some of the ones that we're aware of out here, there's a default beverage ordinance. Several metro area counties are working on these, and it was Loveland, I think. Lafayette, thank you.
Yep.
Started it several years ago, and the Boulder County Public Health got together with a student group, actually, and they did a year and a half of working with restaurants all through Lafayette. They worked with the city council. They got partners to come in. We went in and testified at the city council meeting, as did American Heart and several. So they got they got a coalition. The kids were working on it, and they got a default beverage ordinance passed, which basically says the default beverage for kids' meals at restaurants in Lafayette is milk and water rather than soda. So all restaurants are serving milk and water as the default beverage. You can still pick soda, but the default beverage is milk and water. So that's being copied in several municipalities in the metro area right now. They're trying to work on that. And then Denver looked around and said, we have all these ideas we want to do, but we have no funding for it. And so they put together a coalition, and they ran a ballot initiative 2 years ago, I think, and passed it 2 Novembers ago. And then they've spent a year getting it together, and now they're starting to grant out the funds that were raised with the tax that Denver agreed to. So local policy change can be very, very powerful. I don't want anyone to lose sight of that. Jeff?
Yeah, and I think this was, honestly, the fact that that default beverage ordinance, that it was a student-led group. When I saw those kids presenting and talking about this ordinance, and the fact that they actually got a Chili's, a national corporation, to change their kids' menus to match this default beverage, I was floored and also just really impressed. And it reinforces how important the students can actually be to get them involved and invested in this process, which brings us truly to the school district level, and where you can look to create change and identify opportunities to really bring more resources to your local school district. And one big thing in Colorado is this concept of local control. So, at the federal level, we have federal procurement regulations that really state, anything under $10,000 is a very simple purchasing process. You can just call someone down the street and say, hey, I would love these carrots. Can I buy them from you? Awesome, good. Then we have a small purchasing threshold that goes up to $250,000. And then anything above that has to follow the formal procurement process. Every single school district is able to set their own procurement policies. So sometimes we have actually found that school districts will set procurement policies that are a little bit more stringent than the federal level. In some cases, this makes sense. Smaller school districts most likely aren't going to be purchasing $250,000 of products in an entire school year. So a smaller procurement policy does make sense. However, we have seen some school districts where their procurement policies are at $1,000, and anything above $1,000 must then follow that federal procurement process for the very formal process, it's a bit rigorous. So it's like, if you have a local school district and you want to know what their procurement policies are, and you find out that it's $1,000, that could potentially be hindering them when it comes to purchasing more local products and really supporting the local businesses within their communities. So start doing a little digging and find out, what is that procurement policy? And it could be something that was just set 30 years ago and has not been touched or addressed since then. So do a little bit of due diligence and find that. Another thing that school districts are required to have is an actual health and wellness policy. This is something that is supposed to be renewed, I believe, every 3 years. And they're supposed to actually have health and wellness committees as well. Some school districts that are definitely more well-resourced, have stronger community support, tend to have a very strong, robust health and wellness committee that's very active, very engaged. Other school districts struggle with this. Again, if you're looking to find a way to support your district and you have time and you want to help support, find out if they have, well, they should, but find out what their health and wellness policy looks like, find out what the committee looks like. enjoying it. Start learning about it and find out those ways that you can help and support. The school boards are another great way to just start learning not only about the food and nutrition services program, but the entire big picture when it comes to a school district and everything that they're having to deal with and manage on top of just the food. Because again, I, myself, the team at Nourish, we are big proponents of understanding the big picture so that you can see how your role fits into basically what you're focusing on as well. And then we've also seen school districts that have advisory councils, student-led advisory councils, parent advisory councils, all these different types of groups that are really focusing on different issues that matter and are important to them and trying to bring them forth and make them effectively part of the school district and the culture of that school district and how that school district operates. And when school districts have very active, involved students and parents and a strong health and wellness committee, it's amazing the change that you can actually see happen a lot quicker than all those other districts that are still kind of struggling as well. And it is a culture thing, and it does take time to build this, and policy is a slow process. And thinking about slow processes, I know that those beans take a little while to cook, so I think we should check back in on Chef Fernando and see how those Charo beans, oh, I might have given it away, how the beans are coming along.
Yeah, after there's a lot of learning that we've done, I think it's time to check on those beans and the cornbread. So let's take a look how they're coming along. We're gonna start now with this bean dish, and it's super easy to cook. We're just gonna add some oil to the pot, and we're gonna saute a couple tablespoons. That's all you need. Turn it up to high, and we're gonna add our garlic and onions. And we're only gonna cook these until they are translucent. About 3 to 4 minutes, you need to give it a stir. But look, it's changing color. They're becoming translucent. You want to do this step because the flavor of this onion is so different than raw onion. So we're ready to add our beans, soaked beans from last night. I'm gonna add my water. And don't you worry, we will share the recipes with all the ingredients and measurements. And like I was talking earlier, it is important that you add your salt in the beginning of the cooking process. All right, let's check the beans and see how they're doing. I think they are ready. So they simmer for quite a while and they're nice and tender. You can see they are ready. We added plain water, remember? And what we created, look at that. It is a nice, delicious broth. This is what you want, okay? If they look a little too dry, like so, make sure that you add some water and they're ready to go. You can make some refried beans, serve them as they are. They're ready to go and delicious. Seasoned, perfect. What I want to talk about now is we're going to be making some Charo beans. Actually, it's going to be like a play on Charo beans. And what is a Charo bean? It means cowboy beans. And they have a lot of meat like bacon, some chorizo. People add some ham, different kinds of meat, whatever they may have, some carne asada. They are delicious. They add it to the beans along with some pickled jalapenos, the meat, and then we'll finish it with some cilantro. But right now we're ready to add our jalapenos. They're pickled, chopped, all of them. For the schools, if you're a school, you may not be able to get a hold of some bacon and chorizo. Maybe you can, but I know you can get some ham. So just chop it up, okay? Small dice looks great. And I'm just gonna add it in and let it simmer for just a few seconds, from a few minutes. And then we're gonna add some vinegar and the cilantro. And all right, so they're simmering and we are ready to add the last two ingredients. So I have my vinegar right into my beans and my cilantro. And the cilantro is fresh and I'm gonna turn it off. because when you add fresh herbs at the end, you don't want to keep cooking them. You don't want to lose that freshness, all right? If it was a dry spice, we would have added it in the beginning, but when it's fresh, at the end, and you turn it off. And we have our Charo beans are finished. This is what we want. We always recommend checking your cornbread and turning it halfway through. The timer went off. We still need more time. And we can see it's still wet in the center. We are looking for a nice golden brown, so we got a little ways to go. So I'm just gonna put it back in. And I'm gonna set the timer one more time and come back. All right, so it's been about 45 or so minutes, and our cornbread, it's looking good. Things to keep an eye on. Look at that color on top. You want some nice browning. And also, if you can look around the edges, you can see how the bread separates a little bit from the pan. That's a good sign, telling you that the cornbread is finished. I'm gonna take my knife and insert it right in the middle, pull it out. And if it's looking clean, that's what you want. Our cornbread is ready. We're gonna let it cool here for about 20 minutes before we cut into it, and we'll be able to enjoy it.
Awesome. That cornbread looks so delicious. I happen to be a recipient of some of that cornbread as well. So that's probably one of the best parts of being the filmer. I get to eat all the good food too. So we're going to turn this over to Terry and let her give us some of the basics so that we all can have a similar language to share as we start diving into policy.
Thanks, Jess. We're going to roll through this pretty quickly because there's a more interesting part in a little bit. So this just provides a framework. You'll have these slides that you can reference, or you can always get hold of me anytime if you have questions. But this is just the framework of how the Colorado legislature sets up. Our legislative session is a 2-year cycle. However, that really actually doesn't matter because the 2 years operate very independently of each other. Right now, we're in the first regular session of the 73rd General Assembly. We're in the first regular session because we just had an election. So next year's session will be the second regular session, and then we'll start over again with the first regular session of the 74th General Assembly. As I mentioned, it's early January to early May. That's constitutionally mandated. If there is a public health emergency, they have a Supreme Court decision saying they can extend. So that's why they're able to go into June this year. We are a term limited state. So at the state legislature level, there are term limits for the governor, for the House members, and for the senators. It's 8 consecutive years. So you could spend 8 years as a House member and then get elected to the Senate and actually have 16 consecutive years. Or you can take a break. You could get elected to 8 years in the House, take a 2-year break, and come back again. That's not super common. By the numbers we have in Colorado, we have 65 House seats and 35 Senate seats. So each Senate district represents more people. These obviously overlap, the Senate and House seats. So you're going to have a House member, a representative, and you're going to have a senator that represents you at the Colorado State Legislature. They're all limited to 8 years, but the House is elected every 2 years and the Senate is elected every 4 years. Personally, I think every 2 years election is a little bit crazy because you get elected and then you start focusing on your next election, on your re-election. In the Senate, they have a little more breathing space. Currently, the political makeup in Colorado is we have what's called a trifecta. We have a Democratic governor, we have a Democratic House, and we have a Democratic Senate. We're one of the few states, maybe the only state that has that right now. It's a trifecta, whether it's democratically controlled or Republican controlled. But we have our House is 41 Democrats, 24 Republicans. That number actually stayed the same during the election, although 2 seats flipped. One Democratic seat became a Republican seat and vice versa. But the total number stayed the same. That is a huge majority for the Democrats. I mean, they can do pretty much whatever they want with that kind of majority. The Senate is much closer, although they did gain, the Democrats gained 2 seats, I think. So now there's a 20 to 15 margin in the Senate. For our purposes, bills die at the end of each session, meaning anything that doesn't get passed at the end of this session is dead and they have to start all over again next year. Our budget must be balanced. That's different from the federal level. Most states have that. And then the thing below that is the Tabor Amendment, the Gallagher Amendment, and Amendment 23. Although the Gallagher Amendment was just changed in this last election cycle, alleviating some of the pressure. But these three constitutional amendments work together very badly and put a lot of downward pressure on our state budget and make it hard. It makes it very, very hard to fund new programs, even if we're awash in money. But those three things, that presentation is that's a several-hour presentation in and of itself, but it's just important to know that we've got constitutional amendments that dramatically impact our ability to fund new programs. At the federal level, it's not dissimilar. There are a lot of similarities. States borrowed a lot from the federal government, but their 2-year cycle is more of a true 2-year cycle. And we are currently in the beginning of the 117th Congress, because again, right after the election. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Congress is in session throughout the year. Colorado, 120 days, January through May, but Congress is in session throughout the year. Congress does not have term limits, except for the president, which is limited to 2 4-year terms, consecutive. You could come back again if you wanted as president. Obviously, it's bigger because we have, they're covering a bigger area. So you've got 435 House seats, also elected every 2 years. So they have the same problem at the federal level that we have at the state level in terms of constantly running for election. Right now, the Democrats, there's a trifecta at the federal level as well. So we have a Democratic president, we have a Democratic House, although they lost seats in the last election. So it's a much closer, it's a much narrower majority than it was prior to the last election. You can see we have 222 Democrats and 213 Republicans. And then the Senate is 100 seats. Every state has 2 senators. And they're elected every 6 years, which is actually kind of nice. Right now, it is a 50-50 split. Not super common, it doesn't happen a lot, which means the vice president is the tiebreaker, which is why the Democrats control the Senate, because we have a Democratic president with a Democratic vice president, Kamala Harris. So she sits on the Senate as the Senate president and she breaks the ties. In fact, the American Rescue Plan, President Biden's COVID relief plan, just passed on a 51-50 vote with Kamala Harris being the deciding vote. Unlike at the state, again, all bills at the federal level actually live through the 2-year cycle. So they don't die each year and come back. But if they die at the end of the 2-year cycle, you have to start all over again. That's why CNR died at the end of the last Congress, the 116th Congress. So we have to start all over again in the 117th. There is no balanced budget requirement, as we plainly can see, because we are running trillions of dollars of debt. Also, a little bit of a difference at the state and federal level is a lot of policy happens through agency rule. It happens at the state level as well, but not nearly to the extreme that it does at the federal level. So they'll pass a general bill, and then like Department of Agriculture will create the rules around everything that happens. So there's a lot of lobbying and jockeying for position and advocacy that can happen at the agency level. So that's the basic framework for this, how the state and federal government are laid out.
I learn something new every single time, even on the basics. So we wanted to take a few minutes and review the basics of how a bill becomes a law, a little different than the Schoolhouse Rock version, because we're going to use the House Bill 1132 that we passed back in 2019 as an example to show you what this process looked like. 1, to give you a real life example, and 2, because this was my first time ever truly getting involved in policy and experiencing it from this type of a point of view where we were actually introducing a bill and following it all the way through. So it was an incredible learning experience for myself, and I'm still just floored at the whole process and what it takes to actually get a bill to our governor's desk for him to sign and or veto. So really the biggest step that should happen before any bill is being introduced, this does not always happen, but we did our due diligence where we effectively, I'm known for the culinary terms, but we got our mise en place in place. So we got our stuff in place by basically meeting with different stakeholders at the state level, from school food service directors to local partners on the ground when it comes to food access and really meeting with them to see what are they excited about, what will really help support them. Have farmers come in, Rocky Mountain Farmers Union, like how can we build a bill that is going to really help our school districts to buy local products? And we didn't do this again just with Colorado as like a vacuum. We actually reached out and we looked at the entire nationwide landscape of policies that are out there when it comes to local purchasing. And we did this huge assessment as to what's out there, what's worked, what has been passed, what has not been passed, what are the possibilities. And then from there, we actually started contacting other states who have done this, like Oregon and Michigan and New York, and had phone calls with them to learn what worked, what didn't work. If you could do it again, what would you do? What would you not do? And really, how do we craft this bill in a way to ensure that it is going to make the implementation process rather easy as well? And part of the components of this bill, since it would be a pilot program, is how do you even choose the school districts? What are the regulations behind that to ensure that it is a fair and equitable process? Because again, this is taxpayers' money. So we wanted to ensure that we were doing our due diligence and we were talking to all the people that would be impacted by this and those who have also come before to make sure that we were learning and trying to do this as right as we possibly could, while recognizing that nothing is ever official and things will always change, especially as you go through a process like this. So we did our pre-work, we got our mise en place ready to go, and then we introduced our bill into the House, is how this one worked. And really, this one happened basically on January 25th. The bill was introduced into the House, and then from there, it got assigned into a committee. We ended up being assigned into two committees. We had the Rural and Ag Committee and the House Education Committee. And that basically means it's time to come in and testify. And this is where we need experts like yourselves who are open to maybe trying out a new process and coming in to support and testify for these bills. We actually had a chef from a school district come in and support and testify as to why receiving 5 cents a meal to help purchase local would help her school district actually do more local purchasing. So I got my chance to testify. You have a 3-minute limit for the amount of time that you can speak. There's a little microphone, there's like a little blinking light that tells you like your time's almost up, you better hurry up. I thought there was this real like formal process where you have to always say Mr. Congressman name, Mrs. Congressman's name before answering any of their questions, only come to find out that that's because it's all being recorded. So it's not really like if you don't do this or you're going to get dinged and they're not going to vote on your bill. It's more just a formality for the recording that's also happening. You get asked questions from your congressman and congresswoman. Some of them are reasonable questions. Other ones are like, we don't even grow apples and pears in Colorado, so why should we do local? And you have to answer those in a respectful manner. So that was a learning process for me. And this happened fast. When it comes time to testify, they tell you what day it's going to be up for that committee. And then you have to show up and you have to be ready for either waiting 30 minutes to 2 hours to like 10 hours, depending on the different bills that they are hearing for testimony and who all is coming in to testify for those other bills as well. So it ended up being a pretty good, almost like a half day, day-long experience for each of those two committees as we went through that process. And a lot of waiting around, a lot of me reviewing my testimony as well and making sure I felt ready to go. We passed out of both of these committees. And because our bill had a fiscal note to it, again, we're trying to provide money to schools so they can buy local, we had to go to our House Appropriations Committee, which is basically the money committee. And so they were like, cool, we like this bill. They passed it. And from there, we go to the floor. And this was the House floor. There's actually two processes that happen here. The first one is more of an informal kind of debate. There's a debate and then there's an informal voting process. Once that one's done, they then have the second formal voting process where that gets recorded, written down, yays, nays. We passed out of that. House was supportive of it. It is a bipartisan bill. And then we have to go to the Senate where we basically repeat the whole process again. And we got assigned to a committee, this time only to the Education Committee. This one happened in April, actually it was April 18th when we had that Education Committee. So things started out slow And then they started really happening very fast as we started moving into April, because we're coming to the end of that legislative session. So we passed out of our Senate committee, yay us. And again, it's money. So we had to go back into the Senate's Appropriations Committee. They had to be like, okay, we can fund this, we'll do it. They said yes. And then the same thing happened at the Senate level, where they had to do their debating and vote process. So the informal debates, the informal votes, and then the formal voting process where they actually went on record. At this point, there could have been amendments and we would have had to start the whole process all over again. Thankfully, we had no amendments. It passed and it got sent to the governor. And Governor Polis could have been like, you all, this is ridiculous. I veto, I say no. Thankfully, he did not. He was like, I love it. And he signed the bill, and we actually had the bill signed officially on May 14th. It went into law. So that was a really cool, fun experience for us to go through and for myself to learn and see, but it did take time. And again, like in these committees, this is where we need people like yourselves to come in and do this testimony. I mean, I can do the testimony. I'm happy to be the voice for you all, but we really want to hear it from those who are doing the work every single day, because you can truly help create that change. So that's what we're doing. We're looking at trying to make sure this gets funded maybe next year, maybe the following year. Again, it's a pilot. We would love for it to be funded for the entire school districts in our state. That might be maybe 6-7 years down the road, but we got to build that coalition so that this can actually happen, and we need you all and your voices. And that's how we want to get you all involved. So we're going to quickly run through this, then we'll do the final closing video.
The last thing I want to just tag on what Jess said is they were starting to do this before the pandemic, but they've become much better at it. You actually don't, if you live in Gunnison or Lamar or wherever, you can actually, they're much better at video testifying and phoning in. So you don't actually, you used to have to come to Denver and spend the time. You don't have to do that as much anymore. So they're making it much easier for people around the state to come in and testify. So yet another reason for all of you to email Jess or myself and let us know you want to sign up to be part of our network, sign up to be part of our advocacy network. It's calls to legislators, emails to legislators, coming to testify. That's our two networks. We have our advocacy network and our subject matter expert network. We would love to have all of you be part of it. As Jess said, I think I used to be a lobbyist. They were happy, they're fine talking to me, but they really want to hear from their constituents, people who vote for them or don't vote for them. That's who they want to hear about. They want to know what's going on in their communities. So it's critically important that we have a whole network of folks around the state who can talk about the issues that you know well. I mean, you'll know it way better than anybody else will. So it's important that we have that voice. And then you can just see, get involved locally. We talked about this a little bit. The one thing I do want to say is invite your legislators, Congress, state legislators, city council, whatever, have them out to your schools to have a school meal. I've been to many of these. They're a huge hit. And it really opens a lot of people's eyes. So we're going to move on now because we are, in fact, running out of time. Oh, there is one other thing I did want to say. We have an advocacy network called Food Bill Action Team. We meet every other week. It's a half hour at lunch from noon to 12:30, where we talk about what the hot issues of the day are and how you can get involved. If that interests you, just send me an email. Again, my email is at the end of this. These are just, you'll have these. This is how you can find out what's going on. These are all good websites for knowing what's going on at the state and federal level, and also finding out who your legislators are. And now I believe we are going to check back in on our beans and cornbread.
They should be almost ready. So let's take a look, because we don't want to burn anything. So let's see. Our cornbread is ready to be cut and enjoyed. So here it is. It's been sitting for about 20 minutes. We're going to be using a bench scraper because that's the best tool to cut your cornbread. Try to avoid using a knife because metal on metal may damage your cutting edge. So we're going to be cutting it 8x4 to get 32 portions out of it. Depending on your recipe, make sure that you follow the recipe accordingly. So this is going to be quite simple. I'm going to come to the middle
And I'm just gonna cut it in half with my bench scraper. Make sure that you really start on the edge and go all the way to the bottom. And then we have another 2 squares. Go ahead and cut each one in half. I got my 2 rectangles now, and we're gonna keep dividing, cutting everything by half. All right, and this one as well. Now this other portion, same thing. So find the middle and slice it right in half. Make sure that you really get it well. And these 2 long rectangles, we're gonna cut them in half as well. All right, now that we have that done, it's time to turn it real quick. And we're just gonna keep cutting it by half. So find your middle and slice it right in half, okay? And I'm just gonna make sure that I'm following through. Now you got 2 sides. Guess what? We're gonna be doing the same thing, slicing half of it. Okay, look at that, that's quite easy. And the other half, I have now a nicely cut cornbread. If you have a plastic one, you can use it as well, but the metal ones are the best. All right, get a spatula and get your cornbread out of the pan, and look at that. Ooh, it's even steaming a little bit. This is so delicious. All right, and this is what we have now. We have our finished product, our Charo beans. The garnish, the little cilantro does a lot for it, and that's what you want. The little ham, the pickled jalapenos, they're gonna just bring that flavor of beans to the next level.
I literally ate Charo beans and cornbread for like 3 days in a row, and I did not mind at all. So we will stay on. I know we're a little bit over time. Again, as Terry has mentioned, we have like hour-long presentations just on some of the bills alone. So it's a lot to fit in, especially with policy. So thank you all for being here. If you have any questions, we're going to stay on for the next few minutes for you all. Keep an eye out for the April 27th call that we were doing for LoProCO, because we're going to share farm to school stories around the state. And then we are featuring mushrooms, onions, and barley, but not the drinking kind of barley, the eating kind of barley. You all should know what the drinking kind of barley is. Beer.
Oh, I thought we were. No?
Maybe we will. It is afternoon time. So we'll answer a few questions. Thank you all again very much. If you have any questions, let us know. Otherwise, we are here. Keep an eye out for the recording. We'll share all of the recipes, nutritionally sound recipes for you school district professionals. And the recording will be coming your way by the end of this week, most likely, or early next week. So thank you all so very much for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you in April. Happy Tuesday. Nice. Kristen, that's interesting about quinoa. Are you able to from Taproot though? Like get the quinoa in bulk?
I don't know who Taproot is.
You don't, I wonder if they go, so they're based in the San Luis Valley.
Okay.
Valley Roots Food Hub would be the one that would provide, they would have the quinoa, they would have the potatoes. I'll connect you to Nick, the GM from Valley Roots, to see, because maybe it could just be a micro purchase for you all.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so I'll connect you. I don't know if they're coming up to Gunnison quite yet though, but I think if there's enough demand, they're willing to go wherever the demand is, as long as it makes sense for them with distribution. So
Okay, cool.
yeah, I'll shoot you an email.
Thank you. I also heard the Colorado Potato Administrative Committee might be good to, I could maybe just directly reach out to them and find out some info.
Yeah, and I'm happy to connect you to them too. Jim, I
Okay,
think, is the leader of that one. So yeah, we'll get you
that'd
connected
be
out,
awesome.
especially for the potatoes. And um, there's even a really cool little research project that's happening at CSU with like purple potatoes and fingerling potatoes and everything. So I might even connect you into the student who, she's not a student, she's a genius, who's leading this project, because that might be something of interest to you as
That'd be
well.
awesome. Cool.
Yeah,
Thanks.
yeah, definitely. All of that. All right, I'm gonna make notes on my whiteboard.
Yeah, imagine she was this student. She's a PhD. I think she was a post PhD. I don't know, but she was talking about purple potatoes with more vitamin C than blueberries.
Wow.
Wow.
That's
So
amazing.
yeah, and that's just one kind of potato that I think she was working with, and
Oh, neat.
yeah, so neat, so neat.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. I actually have a call at 3:15 that I need to jump on. So, um, anything else? Natalie, Gloria, we're good to go.
Oops. I have a um. Wouldn't it be cool if commodities could, if the burden was on the state to figure out local sources of USDA foods?
Ugh, yeah. So we've had this question about bison and actually getting bison available through the commodity produce, the USDA foods. And the biggest challenge there is the requirements that are needed on the buyer side, the state side, to actually have enough product to bring in. And I'm trying to like recall exactly how much bison would need to be bought, but it was like tons of bison, like actual literal thousands of pounds of bison. That was almost at an amount that wasn't quite, it didn't quite make sense for the state to actually go and pursue a contract with some of the bison farmers or bison ranchers out there. Um, but we are looking at ways that we can really have the state at DHS not only focus on commodity foods, but also the produce as well and DOD. And they have done a lot with DOD. So we know there's hopes to really get the commodity stuff too. It's like, why not beef? We have enough Colorado beef, but it's such a rigorous process for even these ranchers to get into like the USDA government buying process that it almost again puts those barriers up. So these are ideas that we're looking for as to how we can potentially help support that risk side for these farmers and these ranchers and the additional liability costs that come into play. So they can be basically woven into the USDA foods commodity buying program as well. It's such a beast. I wish it was easier, but yeah, we're working on it. Any ideas? Because potatoes, like frozen potatoes, would be great. And I know like the Potato Growers Association, like they're if there's enough demand from school districts to actually get like diced potatoes and French fries and stuff like that, they will build the facility that they need to actually take these raw potatoes and process them down into the format that you all need. But we're having an information gap effectively. So we don't have enough school districts saying, yes, we will buy this for the potato farmers to actually build the processing plant. So these are things that we're working on building up. But we welcome it all. Yeah. Mike Terry, did you have anything to add to that? USDA foods, commodities? Probably not.
Yeah, I don't, but that's, I mean, all those barriers are things that we're looking at and how we can actually make things easier. But it is going, as Jess said earlier, it's a slow, policy can be a slow process, and the food system is incredibly complicated with a lot of layers. So unfolding all that is going to take some time and effort, like decades and effort. But it's all, to Jess's point, any ideas that you all have or barriers that you run up against, it's always good for us to know that. So
There's no bad ideas. Even if it doesn't
Right.
work, you learn from it. And that's
Right.
one thing that it's like, we can fail all we want, but as long as we're learning from those failures, it's actually doing us some good. So that's how we see it.
And it's just learning.
And it's learning. The growth mindset. You never stop growing. All right. Well, I'm going to drop us off, and thank you, Kristen, as well, for joining and having some great questions as always. And enjoy the rest of your day. Stay warm. And I know y'all aren't expecting the feet of snow, but I know we are.
I'm so jealous. Enjoy it.
All right. Have
Thanks,
a
everyone.
great rest of your day. Thank you, Terry. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
Thank you too.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.